Welcome back, PokeWizards. Have you heard that people are alleging that Logan Paul didn't actually own the $16.5 million Pokemon card that he just sold last weekend? And in fact, the further I looked into this, the wilder the story gets. So are you ready to go down the rabbit hole with me? Let's start at the beginning. In 2022, Logan Paul bought / traded for this Pokemon Illustrator PSA 10 card for $5.275 million. And the reason this card is so valuable, it's extremely rare. There was only 39 of these that were made. You can't buy them in Pokemon packs of cards. These were a prize that were given to an illustration contest. So I think there's only about 39 of these that exist. And all of them that exist, this is the only one that's ever been graded PSA 10, which makes it one of one. It's a very unique card. Now keep that in mind because this being the only PSA 10 will become very important later. And in a smart marketing move, when Logan Paul pretended to fight Seth Rollins in WrestleMania 38, he wore this Pokemon card there and it got a lot of publicity. There's a lot more awareness for Pokemon cards, so it is smart marketing and probably helps drive up the sale of the price. But the other thing that's interesting is that Logan Paul had actually sold shares of this card on a marketplace he started called Liquid Marketplace, which allows people to break up fractional ownership of really expensive things. And this is where some of the controversy comes around. As part of this launch of whatever this fractional business is he owns, he listed this card on there for a $5 million valuation, in which it said he would own 49% of the card and 51% of it would be sold off on the platform. And people were buying in to own a part of the card. So the idea is if the card goes up in value, they would make money, those types of things. So maybe you and I could never own a $5 million card, but we could put $10,000 into it and see if our money improves. So Logan said, because he's selling it to Liquid Marketplace, if he wanted to take the card out publicly for another event or go to a museum, the community of owners would have to vote on that when the time comes. Keep that in mind. And as I look at some of the information on Liquid Marketplace, it's not sure if this is confusing or misleading, but it says that collectors give the card or asset to Liquid Marketplace, then they secure the asset, they fractionalize it into tokens, and it says here ownership of the asset is tokenized. So to me, that means the people who buy these fractional shares have part ownership. They said up to 25% of the asset ownership remains with the collector, and that the tokenized assets get put on the marketplace for an offering, and then those are traded in a fully collateralized real-time exchange. So again, I'm thinking if I buy into this card and it goes up in value, when I sell my shares, I want to make more money off it. And if you know from the video we last put out, this card just sold last weekend for a record-setting $16.5 million. It's the most ever paid, not only for a Pokemon card, but for any trading card ever. It passed the $12.9 million one-of-one Logan Jordan Kobe Bryant autograph cards, and it passed the $12.6 million SGC 9.5 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card. So how did Logan Paul sell this card this past weekend if he already sold it to this fractional marketplace? So this is where some people are saying this is a scandal, but it looks like this is mostly about expectations versus what really was in the legal contract. So critics believed that the fans who bought into the card should have benefited from the larger sale later, and I actually totally agree with that. But Logan says that only 5.4% of that card was actually sold or fractionalized, not the full 51% that was offered. So good job on the Pokemon community for not buying into this sus thing, and that he later bought that portion back for the same price he sold it for at $5 million valuation, and that's allowed under the Liquid Marketplace terms. And that was the explanation for why he could just decide to sell it on his own and keep all the profit for himself. But let me get this straight. You buy a $5 million card in 2022, then you sell off fractional shares of it, and as the card value increases, somewhere later, even though let's say it's worth $10 million or $15 million, you say, you know what? I'm going to buy it back at the old price because I think I could get $15 or $20 million at auction, And so I'm not going to give you any of that upside. I'm going to buy it back at the old price, and I'm going to go sell this card and make my $16.5 million. And honestly, I don't get why celebrities and people with money do this to stick it to the little guy. The idea behind this was they would all share in the fractional ownership of it. So this obviously caught a lot of people upset. So that's where the alleged scandal in the hobby comes from. And you'll see tons and tons of videos about how it's believed that maybe he didn't own the Pokemon card because he'd sold off the fractional shares. And then there's even some allegations that the people who had bought fractional shares never received their money from it, and now the liquid marketplace is defunct and they can't get in touch with people. Logan Paul does say that he paid off everybody at the original price, not the new price. So while this scandal is just going on crazy on the internet, Ken Goldin, who owns Goldin Auctions, where this card was sold, came out to do quote unquote public relations. So let's go through what he says. He says, if there's anyone out there that thinks a company like Goldin or eBay, which is apparently a parent company of Goldin, doesn't look into the legality of every single solitary thing and make sure it's passing with a clean title, unencumbered rights, then you just don't understand business and you just want to hate. I think if he had stopped there, I would agree with him. I'm sure they did their due diligence, and I'm sure they saw that the terms of service is definitely skewed in the favor of Logan Paul, and these fractional people that bought in really had very low rights, and it was kind of unfortunate they even bought into that kind of rug pull. But here's where Ken Goldin goes off a little too far. He says, what I find is that when people complain about stuff, people that will never be my customers in the first place, normally they do not have the money to spend to buy a single thing on Goldin.com, not even their weekly auctions, which is the smaller auctions where it's not $15 million cards, but it's like $10,000 cards. If they just want to complain and be bitter, it's because they can't be happy. They want to tear down an industry. Now, once you get into blaming the complainers, especially at a personal level, instead of just looking at the facts that this seems a little like people got screwed in this, you're kind of losing the argument. And then goes on where he says, maybe they sold their cards too early, maybe friends made money, basically saying that they're just bitter people. And if you love collectibles, then you love what happened with this auction. So what do I think about this? I feel like this is Ken Goldin's let them eat cake moment. So controversy is about the gap between expectations, where I think people who bought into the fractional shares thought the marketing language sounded like they were getting meaningful co-ownership. Owners vote, we're going to own top tier assets. In theory, if it goes up, we're going to benefit from it. When really the platform later said that the fractional holders were limited, bought out, or subject to platform terms rather than automatic participation in Logan's later upside auctions. So really what they're saying is, we fooled you already with our terms of service, and that all this was on the up and up per those terms of service. And so there's nothing wrong with Logan giving you the original price and benefiting from the increase in value all himself, even though during that time you had given him your money to help offset the investment he made in that card. And if you think that's bad, this whole thing gets worse. As soon as this PSA 10 Pokemon card goes up for sale, people looked at the auction photos in detail, and you can see some of them zoomed in here on the right-hand side, and said, I know how hard it is to get a PSA 10 graded. That means perfect condition, no flaws. And on the corners and the edges, you can see some flaws. You can see some damage, some color change there. Colors, the card got dinged and whatnot. So all over the forums, we were saying that should be a 9. There's no way that's actually a 10. It sounded like some believe that this card was resubmitted multiple times and it kept getting a 9 until eventually you get lucky one day and it comes back at a 10 because someone wasn't looking into it as hard. I'm not sure about that, but does that even matter? Well, it matters a lot, because these are the price differences between a PSA 9, which there's 15 other PSA 9s of this card out there, which last sold in last August for $625,000. With all this publicity, those are estimated to be worth $1.3 million, while the only PSA 10 in existence is estimated to be worth $16.5 million. And if that's not crazy enough, since Logan Paul bought this card, PSA has actually made it harder to get a 10. A PSA Gem Mint 10 card right here on their own website says is virtually perfect card. You're not going to see any flaws. It's going to be perfectly centered. They've made the centering requirements tighter now than they used to before. And so what this means is they have tougher standards. So many cards that are currently in PSA 10 holders might actually be 9s according to the new standards. And in fact, PSA says when you re-slab a card, if you need to get it, the holder fixed or whatnot, they will actually regrade it. And if it's no longer a 10 per their standards, they will mark it down to a 9 because they have made these grading requirements even harder. So you can go and do all sorts of research and find out that many people believe that this is not a PSA 10 for all sorts of reasons. And if you were saying like this sounds a little bit conspiracy theory, just believe the grade, it gets a little wilder. Whereas Ken Goldin did what? If you didn't see it, Ken Goldin, who owns Goldin Auctions, the website where this is being sold, he claims, and I am not buying this marketing stunt, that after the card was put up for auction and people had bid on it, I think it had bid up to $5 million, and that during the card being auctioned, he allegedly sent the card in himself to be regraded by PSA without Logan Paul knowing it, and then had a call where he surprised Logan Paul, letting him know that he did this. And Logan Paul said, "I'm glad you didn't tell me. I would have been so nervous because maybe it wouldn't have come back at a 10. I think this is a good move for the buyer because they would want, when they're bidding on it, to know that it really is a 10. But there's no way this is business or ethically legal. If Ken Goldin, imagine I submitted a card to sell at a PSA 10, and Ken Goldin said, well, I'm just going to take your card and send it in to be regraded, and now it's a 9, and now you lose a bunch of money. I'm not sure he could do that with my possession until I auction it. But the other one is people had already bid on that card. They committed to $5 million of bids, and then the item might have changed to a 9 that they'd be on the hook for because it would have gone down. So I don't think on both the seller side and the buyer side that Ken Goldin could have done this without at least Logan Paul's permission. And people are surprised it came back at a 10. So PSA says it's still a 10, even in their new system of grading. That's good for the person who bought it. And obviously this card sold for a record $16.492 million, and that's the record. But wait, there's more. If you made it this far, make sure you click subscribe because we got more Pokemon videos coming for you. So the question is, now who bought it? Well, the buyer is AJ Scaramucci, who said that the purchase is his first to buy a planetary treasure hunt, and he is a venture capitalist of Solari Capital, which is collecting the uncollectible, and apparently people who buy into his venture capitalist thing can make money off of holding valuable assets that are uncollectible. He says he's on a quest to buy T-Rex dinosaur fossil. He wants to buy the Declaration of Independence for this kind of thing, and he's not stopping there. So this card was only the beginning. Side note, AJ Scaramucci, who's the founder of Solari Capital, is the son of former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. So I feel like this is probably more of a marketing stunt. I think his capital firm and Goldin Auctions and PSA got a lot out of this. And even if the card really wouldn't be bid up this high, by bidding it up, it got more publicity. And so I do think it was a good marketing stunt if that was what the plan was. So what do I think, and why is this quote-unquote scandal taking on a life of its own? Well, the more I hear about these inside games of the high-end card market, it just makes you feel like you don't trust it as much. Like the powerful, the wealthy, and those with proximity to big companies like PSA, do they get favoritism? It definitely also has a whole story around it. Feels like the little guys, like the fractional owners, just get screwed in this. Imagine if they bought fractional ownership of the card and the card value went down. I'm sure Logan Paul wouldn't have given them their money back at full price. So it's like they had all the downside with no upside, and whether that was clearly communicated or not, that's bananas. And I'm not sure why someone as wealthy as Logan Paul needs to do this to the little guys. But Logan Paul himself, he can get money from people for his card, And if it goes up in value, he gets to keep all the upside. So it doesn't make sense. The other reason this has legs is it feels like the question of, did PSA give Ken or Logan special treatment in the regrading process? If you or I had submitted a card that looked like that, do we think we would have gotten a PSA 10? I know that PSA generally doesn't touch cards. They're not going to remove anything that's on there if it's just dust or anything like that. They, like, when you send it in, maybe Ken Goldin had someone work on the card and make sure that it's all clean and wipe everything off before they send it in, but 10 shouldn't have anything on it anyway. So this seems a little suspicious in my opinion. And then, was this a real auction or a marketing stunt? And I think Logan Paul, Goldin Auctions, PSA, and then this Solari Capital thing all get a ton of publicity. So I'm not sure we're really going to know. Thank you so much for watching this video. Watch one of our other videos next, and make sure you click subscribe because we got a lot more coming for you. Thanks.